Back in the Great Depression, a phantom haunted the city of Cleveland. And this wasn't just any killer. They were a butcher, a ghost who dismantled their victims with, believe it or not, surgical precision, and then just vanished, leaving an entire city completely paralyzed by fear. This is the absolutely chilling and still unsolved case of the Cleveland torso murders. So, to really get this story, you have to picture Cleveland in the 1930s. I mean, the Roaring '20s? That was a lifetime ago. Now the city was just crushed by economic collapse. Factories were dead silent, thousands were out of work, and this heavy, dark cloud of hardship just hung over everything. And of course, with that hardship came desperation. This created a whole population of forgotten people. Drifters, the unemployed, folks living right on the absolute edge of society. They were vulnerable, they were transient, and tragically, they were invisible. Just the perfect prey for a predator who was operating in the shadows. At the very heart of all this was a place called Kingsbury Run. It was this desolate ravine, kind of like a scar running right through the city, filled with shantytowns and scrapyards. It was a place of total decay, and it became both the hunting ground and the dumping ground for the killer who would earn the terrifying name, the Mad Butcher. So here's what we're going to dive into. We'll explore the city's hidden nightmare. We'll trace the horrifying trail of bodies the killer left behind. We'll look into the prime suspect they called the Phantom Surgeon. And finally, we'll listen to the whispers from the grave as modern science tries to crack this ancient case. See, the Great Depression didn't just create poverty. It created the perfect cover. In these sprawling shantytowns, the so-called Hoovervilles, people could literally vanish without anyone even noticing for weeks, maybe even forever. This was the exact environment the killer used to their advantage. And here's the really chilling contrast. While the city's elite were putting on this brave face, celebrating the Great Lakes Exposition, this private terror was unfolding in the shadows. It was a real-life horror story that put the city's brand new public safety director, the famous untouchable Eliot Ness, under this incredible pressure cooker of public fear and political games. Okay, so now let's talk about the victims and the killer's gruesome, unforgettable signature. Because this wasn't just murder. This was a systematic erasure of human beings. Officially, the Mad Butcher is credited with at least 12 victims between 1935 and 1938. 12 canonical victims, though, and a lot of people think the real number could be much, much higher. And this right here is the central tragedy of the entire case. Most of the victims were those forgotten people, the drifters, the nameless faces of the Depression. Their transient lives made them almost impossible to identify, even back then. To this day, only 2 of the 12 have ever been formally identified, a man named Edward Andrassy and a woman named Florence Polillo. So the killer's reign of terror stretched over 3 absolutely terrifying years. It all started in 1935 with the discovery of 2 men in Kingsbury Run, and then it seemed to just stop, just as abruptly in 1938, leaving this trail of unanswered questions that still haunt people today. Now, the killer's method was terrifyingly precise. The dissections were clean, no hesitation marks, which suggested someone with real anatomical knowledge, maybe a butcher, a hunter, or even a surgeon. Decapitation was a clear signature, and the heads were often taken, which was like the final act of wiping out the victim's entire identity. And the discoveries were just horrifying. The remains of Edward Andrassy were found near another man, both of them naked except for their socks. Florence Polillo, who was a part-time prostitute, was found in pieces, literally packed into baskets, and just left behind a factory in the dead of winter. It felt like the killer was taunting the entire city. The police were so desperate. I mean, get this. For one victim, known only as the Tattooed Man, they took this extraordinary step. They made a plaster death mask of his head and put it on display at the Great Lakes Exposition. Over 100,000 people saw it, and not one single person could give him a name. This level of skill and just pure audacity led to a massively frustrating investigation, one that would nearly break Eliot Ness. But it also pointed him toward one man he was convinced was the killer, even if he could never, ever prove it. I mean, that was the question that haunted everybody, right? The investigators, the public. Who had the skill to dismember a human body so cleanly, the savagery to do it again and again, and the cunning to never leave a single clue behind? So, the investigation eventually zeroed in on one main suspect, Dr. Francis Sweeney. He was a brilliant surgeon who, during World War I, served in a medical unit that specialized in amputations. He was also an alcoholic with a pretty troubled personal life. I mean, he fit the profile perfectly.
But here's the most damning piece of circumstantial evidence. Police, under Ness's command, interrogated Sweeney for weeks. He never confessed. Frustrated, out of options, Ness made a really controversial call. He ordered a raid on Kingsbury Run, burning the shantytowns to the ground to cleanse the area. And shortly after that, Sweeney voluntarily committed himself to a mental institution. And the official torso murders in Cleveland stopped. Cold. The timing just seemed way too perfect to be a coincidence.
But, despite Ness being so certain, there was no hard evidence. Dr. Sweeney was never charged. The case of the Mad Butcher officially went cold, becoming one of America's most infamous unsolved mysteries, completely shrouded in rumors of mob connections and buried police files. So the case went cold for decades. But now, let's look at how modern science is actually trying to answer the questions that have haunted this mystery for almost a century. For over 80 years, the victims were just nameless whispers from the past. But now, something called forensic genealogy is breathing new life into this old case, and it's offering the first real hope of actually restoring their identities. Groups like the DNA Doe Project are now applying this cutting-edge science to the case. What they're hoping to do is extract viable DNA from the remains of the tattooed man and the other unidentified victims. Then, by tracing that DNA through public genealogy databases, they can build family trees and, hopefully, finally give these long-dead victims their names back. And that's really the ultimate goal here. As Christina Randolph from the DNA Doe Project says, it's not even about solving the murder at this point. It's about dignity. It's about giving back a name to people who had everything, including their own identity, so brutally stolen from them. It's a really powerful question, isn't it? While the killer's identity might be lost to history forever, modern science offers this profound possibility, a name for the nameless. And yet, even if their identities are finally restored, the full story might just stay in the shadows, locked away in suppressed police files and the forgotten stories of a city that had to live with a phantom it could never catch.